You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and how are we all? Is everyone getting ready who's going to Sage this weekend up in Coombe Abbey near Coventry? Well, a little bit of a surprise for you. Got confirmed a couple of days ago. I'm going to be there on Saturday, speaking to some of the guests, getting some interviews all ready for you to listen to on Spreaker. So keep an eye on the Parasearch page because we'll let you know when they're going out on there, or just listen to the podcast afterwards. You never know, I might even do a few Facebook Lives and grab a few people who we know to say hello on camera as well. But I'm looking forward to it. It should be very exciting, and I know MJ, who's been organising it, has been working incredibly hard. So, and I think there are still a few tickets. So if you want to get a chance to meet people like Katrina Weidman, Chris Fleming, Richard Eastep, Cal Cooper, oh crumbs, can't remember the list now, Aaron Sagers, who did an absolutely brilliant interview with Kerry on Sunday's Spirit Dimension show. Grab a ticket, get on that website, grab a ticket, because there's not many left, but there's a few. And if you're there on Saturday and you see me walking around looking a bit tired, come and say hello. Make sure you do, come and say hello. So, Sage, very exciting, looking forward to that one. What else have we been up to? Well, we've still got our YouTube channel, so if you haven't clicked like, share and subscribe to that one yet, get over there and get doing it. Much appreciated. And we've got a new competition about to launch. Haunted Magazine have very kindly donated 4 back issues of their magazine, various copies, and we're going to be putting the photo up on our Facebook account a bit later tonight once the show's finished. So if you fancy being in with a chance of winning those, go over to the page and enter the competition. That would be great. We'd love that. So what have I been up to? Well, I have been a busy girl the last couple of weeks. I've been busy with my day job, and then on Friday I drove the 150 miles, I think it was, from where I live in Essex to Mansfield to get a chance to explore the village with the lovely Lee Roberts, Ryan Griffiths and all the Haunted Events UK team. Well, I can honestly say it was a very interesting evening, and probably the best thing that happened to me was using one of those voice random word generators, the Alice box. As I was talking, the word penny came up on it. No word of a lie. The word penny came up on it. Now, I know there's something like 10,000 words on that, but I'd love to know if someone could work out the statistics for me as to what's the chance of it coming up when me, one of about 12 people, was talking, and also the chance the name Penny came up. I think it was a bit weird. But anyway, that aside, rather than me rambling on for ages, because I've told you about our new competition, I've told you about Sage, I've told you about what I've been up to, I think we should play the interview, shouldn't we? Because, well, this Pryzm nightclub, it sounds an interesting one. Okay, so you've listened to me chat on for the last 10 minutes, and you've heard about our new competition that we're running at Parasearch, where Haunted Magazine have very kindly donated some of their back issues for you guys to win as a bundle. And it's really only apt, then, that my guest is the boss man of Haunted Magazine. It's one Mr. Paul Stevenson.
Hello.
Hello.
Penny.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you ever so much for donating those back issues.
Pleasure.
It's much appreciated.
I think the beauty of the magazine is that, obviously, when it's in print, we don't print a number, but some obviously get left in the office, so we're quite happy to donate them for your listeners.
Thank you very much. Thank you. One of the things I love about, obviously, you do the magazine in print, but you also have the free online to read as well, which I think is superb.
But we always say that to be able to read it online, it's and it's, if we charge 99 pence, people might not buy it. We thought we'd make it free, make it available all over the world. People can read it, and if they want to buy a print copy of the shiny, glossy one, then they can do that.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of having it free is that as many people who want can go online in Haunted Magazine. It's there waiting for them. So
well, it's a good way to advertise as well, isn't it?
It is.
Especially if you know that, say, you're going to be meeting Katrina this weekend at Sage, you can buy the copy that she was in and see if you can get her to sign it when you're there.
I'm sure she will. And
you're going to be at Sage, aren't you?
We're there, yeah. We've got a store there, so we'll be there. Come and say hi. Anybody's going magazine if you want to. So,
well, I'm waiting to get my article in it next year.
I'll get
that article to you.
You're penciled in.
I'm penciled in. Penny's penciled in.
Actually, next year is 10 years of Haunted Magazine. We started in 2009, the first issue. So went from print to digital, back to print again. But now it's 10 years since we first started. So we're going to try and do something a bit special, have lots of events and stuff and lots of special things. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll announce that very shortly.
Awesome. Keep us posted. Do keep us posted. So you guys, Haunted Live, I suppose, UK, to differentiate yourselves from our gorgeous Tennessee Wraith Chaser boys.
Haunted Live UK, yes.
Yeah, Haunted Live UK. You've been quite busy just recently.
Very busy,
You've done some pretty interesting investigations, but the one I wanted to talk to you about tonight was you guys spent the night in a nightclub.
We did. I know. I was in a nightclub for 20 years. I tell you, it was.
I mean, how out of place did you feel?
Well, because it was empty, I felt all right. But no, it was good. I mean, I went to this nightclub 20 years ago, so as a youngster. So to be fair, even though the name's changed, it did look very familiar. You stuck to the floor still. You got that sticking to the floor feel when you walk in certain bits of carpet. But the old set, although it's modern now and funky lights, the stairs were the same, the balcony was the same. So it was nice to be able to have a flashback to happier younger days. Well, not happier, younger times.
Well, the club we're talking about is now called Pryzm nightclub in Nottingham.
Yes.
It's on. Is it Lower Parliament?
It is. Yeah. It's on. Yeah. It's, not basically in the centre of Nottingham. NG1A something. Really in the centre of Nottingham, literally.
Right. Oh, it's quite an oldish build. What was it called then when you used to frequent there?
Ritz's.
It's called what?
Ritz's.
Okay.
It was called the first. Yeah, I'll tell you a bit of history.
You're gonna steal my thunder because I've done the history bit.
You go on. It's called the Ritz's. After that, Oceana, and then our Pryzm for the last 2.5 years.
Well, the building itself was built in 1925.
That's correct.
As a dance club, and it was called the Palais de Danse.
You're very good, Penny. You really are.
You even like the pronunciation, Palais
de
Danse.
I did. Cracking that was, yeah.
Yeah. But say it was built in 1925, but and what was interesting is I'm I'm a bit of a nerd when I'm looking stuff up.
I do.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about what was on the original site of the Palais de Danse in a second. But I thought, I wonder if there's any sort of deaths or things that weren't very nice that ever happened in this club. Now, I found quite a few accounts after the Second World War finished of fights and windows being smashed and things like that in 1948 and 49 in the newspapers, which I thought was, hey-ho. They always say, the good old days. Well, good old days seem to be just as bad as the new days. But anyway, I did find note of a woman who died on the dance floor.
Seriously?
Seriously. It was on the It was in a newspaper dated the 25th of March 1940. It was one of the Nottingham newspapers, and this lady was 54. Her name was Clara Richardson, and she was attending a morning coffee dance, and she collapsed on the dance floor, and they couldn't get ambulances out. Obviously, it's the middle of the Second World War, and ambulances weren't really around much back then anyway. They certainly weren't like we have them now. And so somebody took her to the hospital in the back of their car, but she was dead on arrival. I thought that was quite sad.
It is quite sad, because you don't expect an afternoon tea to have an unhappy ending, do you? Really? You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, we did some research. We didn't find out. We found a few deaths. Well, I think Winnickley Jack something. He died in the late 60s. He was cleaning the Pryzm nightclub, or as it called, the globe, like the world with a ring around it, and he was cleaning that, and he fell off. His lad had a heart attack and sadly died. So
I didn't actually go that far forward. I stopped after about 1947, 48, because there was a lot of newspaper articles. I
think it's sad that such a place that was classed as an entertainment place has some sad times, unfortunately.
Yeah. It also had a lot of good times during the Second World War, because they used to give a discount to members of the forces. I think anyone who wasn't forces had to pay, would it be two shillings to get in? And those members of the forces had to pay 1 and 6, and there was a buffet and everything. Wouldn't you want that at a nightclub now, to have a buffet that you could attack? Or is that just me?
Like a burger outside normally, isn't it?
Yeah, but the one that you don't have to pay for, that's all inclusive.
Exactly.
That would be very nice.
I think nightclubs, I don't know if you agree, but I think nightclubs then were classed as a bit more defense, a bit more classy than they are now.
Yeah, there were dancing clubs, dance halls.
Dance halls, that kind of thing. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and it's where people didn't necessarily go to as meat markets like maybe they do now. Yeah. Oh God, you can tell I'm old, can't you? It's a meat market. Anyway, so yeah, built in 1925. But the thing I found quite interesting, and this really did make my little history radar start going ping, 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 is what was on the site beforehand.
Oh yes, I knew you'd like it.
I did. It was actually the Nottingham House of Correction. And it was on the junction
What a cracking name.
I know. Well, I'm actually going to explain what the difference between a house of correction and a prison was as well. Because, I don't do things by halves. But it was on the junction of Glasshouse Street and King Edward Street, which was actually St John's Street or St John's Chapel back in then. Now, the House of Correction opened in 1789 as a House of Correction. Now, a house of correction. Do you know what the difference is between a house of correction and a prison come jail?
Well, I'd like to say yes, but you're probably going to
correct you.
I see the difference as being a prison where you serve a sentence for a crime. House of correction will be more rehabilitation. Am I right? And that kind of thing.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Originally, houses of corrections, and this is where the history teacher gets her hat on. Back in the Elizabethan times, there was an Elizabethan poor law. It came in 1601, which basically put those who were, as they would say, who were unwilling to work, such as beggars and vagrants and stuff. They were put into these houses of correction because it was seen to be almost like quasi-criminal offence that they didn't want to work. But they weren't committing a crime like murder or anything like that, but they were committing a crime being, as far as they were concerned, unwilling to work and unwilling to earn money. As time progressed, come the sort of 18th century, in the 1700s, so when this one actually opened, it was a lesser version of a prison. So whilst it wasn't so much for rehabilitation, it was seen for lower crimes, and they were also called bridewells. So whenever you travel around somewhere, you might see, and I know this Norwich has got one. I was trying to think now. I thought 3 or 4 as I was doing the research. Bridewell Alley, Bridewell Street. The Bridewell was what would have also been known as the House of Correction. So it was kind of a less strict prison. So, and the sentences were also a lot lower. Normally, they couldn't sentence someone to be in one for more than 2 years.
Right.
So prison had harder, longer sentences, and but the bridewells and the houses of correction were known as basically being breeding grounds for people to learn how to do crime, even more so than a prison, because of the fact the sentences were low. So they'd get out, but there'd be a lot of the people in there were frequent flyers. But what was interesting in that Nottingham, it started off as the House of Correction. But then in 1846, it actually became the town jail. So, of course, you have more prisoners going in there. And then from 1878, it became the local prison for the whole area.
Yeah.
And what I found was that in 1848, it had 388 inmates. By 1878, it had 1,880.
Wow.
And by 1883, so a mere 5 years later and 8 years before it shut, it had 3,641 inmates.
Wow. So times by
you can
from wow, that's amazing. And I'm guessing that the place hadn't got bigger. It was the same size. It
not
just
that
had
I could find.
more inmates.
No. Obviously, more people crammed into more rooms, and less sort of stipulation as to they had to be able to get out and do hard labour and everything else. And I did actually look up in the newspapers for the 1800s. I looked up to see if I could find any accounts of people, and I did. And I'm going to go through a few of those in a second, because a lot of their crimes, they were what you'd call trivial. In my so not only have you got the fact that this land had a nightclub on it, which is going to have an energy of its own. We all know what facilities of incarceration are like.
Yeah.
For energy, so you've got that energy on the place as well. Now, tell me why you went to Pryzm in the first place. What piqued the Haunted Guys' interest?
We went because the Nottinghamshire local paper ran something on it, because the manager, Tom, he was in the back office one day, and he had on his alarm went off saying the till was open. So it was empty. The particular bar was empty, but there's no reason for the till to be open. He got there and it had shut. So we said, what's going on there? So they got the CCTV, and they found, when they're watching it at the time that the alarm went off, the safe, the till opened and shut, and the drinks cooler below the till also opened and shut. And they thought it was very weird. They said the local paper, who then put it online, and then the national press picked it up. So we, being Nottinghamshire lads, went in and said, look, I'd love to come and see if they can hear, see what caused it, that kind of thing. And he jumped at the chance. So we loved it. It was 2 hours of just to go back into a natural scenario and to go to the first time ever there's been a ghost hunt there, and just to see if anything happened. Again, we did the research, not as much as you, but we found about the prison and that kind of thing. And like you said, the energy between, from the negative to the happy, positive times we've been in the nightclub. But we haven't found something before that. I don't know if you did, or you went back. There was a secret society called the Knights Hospitallers, a bit like Knights
Hospitallers, yes.
A bit like Knights Templars / Masonic type of thing. They had a convent there, St John's Convent, and that nice King Henry VIII robbed them of all the money, and then it obviously became the prison a couple hundred years later, that kind of thing. So there's lots of dark, negative energy mixed with the positive, happy vibes of a nightclub, and it was amazing just to go, because part of the old cloakroom, which don't use anymore, it went down some cellars, some steps, and it looked like it had the original prison walls, which was really cool. Yeah, really, or some kind of old wall, old building anyway. So it was really cool. But people mentioned that they were there, or they'd been there in the 60s and 70s, and had felt something and seen something, but had never had the chance to say anything before. So it was great that we were getting those comments on the live. But I don't know if you managed in your research to find some of this weird, as daft as it sounds, Penny, we heard a few squawks like a parrot. As daft as it sounds, now it's the first time I've ever heard a parrot on live ghost hunting, but people said that there used to be a parrot in a cage at the Palais de Danse in the 1920s and 30s.
No, I haven't seen that in any newspaper.
Tried to find that out. We can't, because obviously people around that time sadly aren't here anymore.
Leave it with me. Leave it with me. Yes, I shall see what I can find.
But it was a parrot squawk. We all said, that's a parrot. And then somebody said, oh yeah, apparently in the, we tried to get hold of them and they not responded to us. But yeah, I want to find out where they know this from. So if you are listening and you did watch our live and you did say there's a parrot in the Palais, please get in touch with Penny or myself.
Oh, definitely. No, I will get my research hat on and look that one up for you. It's interesting you say about the Knights Hospitallers, because I can't remember the show I did recently, but I mentioned them because they came up in a show I did. I think it was I want to say it's to do with Malta, actually, when I did the show on Malta. But they do still exist, the Knights Hospitallers, because they're a medical unit.
Right.
Whereas the Knights Templar were more of a sort of fighting, and the Knights Hospitallers, yes, they were knights and they could wield a sword if they needed to, but they're more of a medical kind of hospital, and they still exist now.
Really? Are they based? Do you know where they're based? Are they local to us, or are they just additional?
No, I can't remember actually off the top of my head where they're based. I just remember when I looked into them, the fact that they're still around, whereas the Knights Templar. I'm just actually looking it up while we're talking.
I mean, you and I always said in the past that it's not what is there now, it's what was there before, which helps. And obviously, you've done some cracking history, and obviously we found out about the Knights Hospitallers. So it just goes to show you've got 500 years of history there.
Yeah, at least
that could impact on anything that may happen.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if I can find them. They talk about them obviously in the same breath as the Knights Templar and everything else.
Yeah. And the bit that we found, it mentioned a sort of Knight Templar, slash Masonic Society, which I guess you can be linked to anyway. But I thought it was interesting how we went back to the 1580s, that kind of thing. Before then, Henry VIII did his robbing of the rich kind of thing, but not to feed the poor, unfortunately, and everything. But and then obviously House of Correction. I mean, it's a cracking name. I think when we found out about it, we absolutely think, what a cracking name, the House of Correction. It just, it's to call it a prison is great, because obviously it does what it does. But just to have this House of Correction on your doorstep is just quite amazing.
Well, the thing is, they were these houses of correction on the doorsteps because it's funny, we were talking about the tour I did of Chelmsford recently, but anyone who goes into Chelmsford High Street, where Marks and Spencer stands now, is where the House of Correction stood in Chelmsford.
So basically, most towns would have had one, or not?
They would have done. Right? Yeah, they would have. They would. I mean, especially from, I say, houses of correction really were from the Elizabethan era, but. Then it became a lot of those people that probably would have gone into a house of correction from the early 1800s would have gone to the workhouse. Instead, there was quite a close link between the two. And then the houses of correction did become more for what you'd call minor crimes. So everywhere would have had one. And it would have been quite close to the centre of town, which I find absolutely astounding. But then again, when you look at it, some of the Victorian prisons that were built in the 1800s, they're not that far from town, really.
No, not really.
And the only reason some of them were moved out of town was because they needed more land to make them bigger. Yeah. And when you look at that, it's quite every town or city would have had its own house of correction. Because they only did they would do hard labour when they went into them. They would only go in. I mean, the average sentence I found looking at the articles, I was looking at some of the newspapers from 1850, 1851 for Nottingham and the assizes and what people were being given as sort of sentences, and the average was about 5 months. Normally, the lowest one I found was for a 1 month sentence, and the longest, well, I found one that was 10 months, and he died before he finished his sentence. But most of the sentences were between 1 and 6 months.
It's a bit like sort of like you go to the House of Correction, and with the hindsight, these people who run the House of Correction want to turn you into a better person, so you don't commit crime again. But obviously, a lot of them did. Yeah,
a lot of them did. I mean, there was one that I found. Her name was Eliza Reynolds, and she was 20, and she got sentenced 6 months hard labour at Nottingham for stealing napkins, an apron, and a tablecloth from the inn that she worked at. Now, the reason I don't know why she got 6 months, because it made no mention that she'd had a previous offence, whereas a man by the name of Matthew Cooper, on the same sort of assizes, was given a month's sentence of hard labour for stealing a pair of trousers. Yet another bloke called Joseph Barker was given 6 months because he stole a pair of women's boots, and that was because he had been in prison before, and so they wanted to give him a longer sentence than they would normally give someone who'd just stolen a pair of boots. So it really seemed to depend on... I mean, I suppose those places that didn't have a house of correction, yes, they would have automatically gone to the prison. But this was it would have been the town jail by this point, so there was probably sort of... depending on what the sentence was, is what kind of judicial system I suppose they were falling under. But yeah, everywhere would have had a house of correction and then a jail. And I can't find any trace, and I might be wrong, and if anyone's listening, please do tell me, because I'm interested to know. But I can't find anything that people would have been executed in the houses of correction. You would have only been in the jail. I think you could have been executed. Or if you had a death sentence placed on you, you wouldn't have gone to the House of Correction. So it's a nice idea. Minor things.
Nice idea to try and think that by a lesser sentence, you would learn, you would learn right from wrong and come out being a better person. But as you said, a high proportion of people just didn't.
It was they had a life of crime. That's how they knew. I mean, when you look at prison reform and people like John Howard. He wanted people to rehabilitate. That's why his thing was they had to have religion, they had to have fresh air, they had to have solitude and time to themselves, i.e. one woman's cells, which never really happened for long. But it was all those things, because he believed even back in the early 1700s that rehabilitation was the way to stop the crime rate going up. And how different is it now? Still we think by training people, by giving them the opportunities, they'll rehabilitate. It's not a new thing. But yeah, so I do find it, and I was just looking up whilst we were talking. I was multitasking because I'm a girl, I can do that.
Rather you than me.
And I know why. Yeah, the Knights Hospitallers were actually originally the Knights Hospitallers of St John of Jerusalem, and their saint, if you like, was St John the Baptist. And their headquarters were originally in Jerusalem, but they were forced out of Jerusalem in the 1300s, and that's shortly after that is when they went to Malta, and they became the Knights of Malta.
Right.
And even though they did have a kind of an armed division to protect them, even now they are they work for the sick. Even now, so yeah, there's a lot of things that you can look at that still happen now. Say the Knights Hospitallers, the rehabilitation of prisoners. But what I'm interested to know, is what actually happened on this investigation. What really stuck in your mind?
The thing that stuck in my mind was the parrot, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And the beauty of the nightclub is that it wasn't full. There was us live, Haunted Live. There was Tom, the manager, and there was a woman in the back office doing all the social media sharing and stuff of the live. And obviously we picked up whilst we used Alice Box and some other devices. Picked up some names of people. I think Cooper was mentioned. You mentioned Cooper. In your
Matthew Cooper,
one of the Cooper. I have to double check that, but I'm sure Cooper was mentioned. But whilst we were on the dance floor, which was during the Palais de Dance, was a revolving dance floor apparently at the time, I felt like dizzy, lightheaded, like we were moving, which is after the dance didn't revolve anymore, but also felt that there was some kind of dark, nasty energy. And nothing happened while we were on the dance floor. Above the balcony, we saw shadows. It looked like someone was watching us now, called out and did all the usual things, and nothing came forward. We moved on to the cellar bit where the old cloakroom was, and none of us on the dance floor, we heard this massive bang on the dance floor. I can confirm none of us were on the dance floor area. We're getting to check the CCTV to see if anything happened. It's not completed yet, but when it does, we'll obviously update the show and everything. But there's a lot of strange things there, Penny, and talking to you about the history and the energy native side, it does feel mixed, because some of it felt quite nice, people trying to come forward or say something or do something to it, that kind of thing. But at times it also felt like there was a mixture of, dare I say, nastiness, if that makes sense. With the words like hate, assault, and murder, and those come through on the devices in particular. But it was on the dance floor where we felt really weird. The dance floor, the main dance floor, the bottom. There's a balcony across the top overlooking the dance floor. That's where we saw shadows. I think the other name could come across, and a few other names. But it was just one of those nights where some areas, people do lives, people do ghost hunts, that. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's kicking off like Billio. And it was just a fun night. It was just great to be, we've been all over the country doing lives and investigations, but to be in our own town doing something like that was, based on, because what we saw with the till opening and closing, that kind of thing, a week before, was just pretty cool to do that. It's a cracking location. It's all right. It's a modern nightclub now, modern name and everything. But the building is historical. Some of the old balconies are there from the 1920s, and it's just an amazing place. So yeah, we've got a bit of activity. We're doing some more research now regarding names, and I'm sure you'll help us with that and everything. But if you can find out about the parrot,
I'm good. I've written it down.
Because we were in the cloakroom, all of us. And we all said, virtually in unison, sounds like a parrot. A really squawk. We had the two squawks. I thought, what the heck is a parrot doing? Is it somebody mimicking a parrot? And then somebody on the comments said to us, apparently there's either a legend or a rumour that there was a big parrot in a cage in the 1920s, 1930s, that would squawk when it was either closing time or whatever, something like that. So,
we talk about the fact that people sometimes take all this stuff too seriously, and you've got to inject a bit of humour into it. I have no problem with spiders. I have no problem with snakes. If you told me there was the ghost of a bloody bird in a venue, I wouldn't be in there. Really? I've gone into places where there's spiders, nests all along the walls. That's people have said there's ghosts of rabid dogs. You name it. That doesn't bother me. You tell me there's a ghost of a bloody bird, and I'm gone. If I thought a bird had flown past me and I heard a squawk as something went past me, then you would hear me scream.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know why we're dismissing it, because at the end of the day, if there are spirits or ghosts of humans in these buildings that we investigate, why can't it be ghosts of animals? Because they are
even
living.
If it's a residual thing, it's just like that indent in time sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, we like what we all said that's a parrot, and it's like what?
Oh, I hate birds though. I really. That's my. I mentioned about investigating with the Haunted Events UK crew on Friday, and I was looking in a dark corner, and Ryan came to look in it, and there was quite a large spider sitting there, and I told Ryan to back off because he's petrified of spiders. I can cope with that. If you'd told me there was a bird there, or even the ghost of a bird, I would have been gone. I would have been out of there. You can throw the scariest noises at me, the nastiest spooks, you name it, I haven't got a problem. My name can come up on spirit boxes telling me they're following me. Not a problem. Bird noise, or someone tells me there's a ghost bird in this area. I'm done. I'm not going.
I meant to say, actually, Andy, one of our team, he was in, we'd do a wrecking. We split up devices in certain areas, trigger objects. And Andy, the boudoir room was designed like a 1920s, 1930s boudoir, really quite cool actually. And he was talking to Jason about where to put this, and what he didn't know was that Jason had gone. And then Jason came back up the stairs, and it kind of freaked Andy out because he swore blind. It wasn't during live, this was before. He swore blind. He's having a conversation with Jason, and somebody spoke to him and said, whatever. And he said, do you want me, mate? It's kind of freaked him out, to be fair. So, it's not what happens on live, the 2 hours or 3 hours. It sometimes can be what happens before as well.
Very much.
But, so it's quite kind of freaked him out. And, I trust my life. And for him to say that it wouldn't make it up, there's no need to make it up. So it's kind of thinking, well, there's the first proper interaction with some kind of entity, you know what I mean? It's a cracking place. I urge anyone, if you fancy boogie, to go there. But we spoke many times, Penny. I urge anyone to check out your local, wherever you're based, wherever you live. Check out your local history because it's amazing what you can find.
It is, and so finding out that where Marks and Spencer's is now is where the House of Corrections was in Chelmsford. Obviously, it doesn't look the same because it all got pulled down and everything else, but it's on that site. I find all of that really interesting, and what you're saying about activity happening when you're not actually filming, it's really annoying when that happens, when you're not got your voice recorder going or you're not filming. Mm-hmm. But how often is it that something happens when you're just having a natter before you set? You're literally just, we'll put this here and we'll put that there, and something happens, or you're just about to leave the room because you've just been checking out where the emergency exits are or something, and that something happens, or when we're talking about laughing and joking on investigations, you've just had a laugh, you just corpsed at something, if you pardon the pun, and then something happens when you're least just after that, and you're like, whoa. I mean, it seems to be the more happens when you're least expecting it than when you're almost asking for it to happen. Exactly.
We've been in places where it's been quite quiet, and then we've sort of like chatted amongst ourselves, and it's like saying, "Oh, I'm still here." I may be quiet, but you're talking. You ignore me now, so I'm going to do something. I'm now going to go in somebody here. I'm now going to bang something. So if there is anything there. Maybe, and if it is got the personality of what it was when it was alive, it still makes me think, I'm being good here. I'm going to say something. I'm going to say to you before that it may just be scared to interact, or it
may not know how to straight away because nobody's asked it to for so long. So
I'm a big believer of humour being serious. When you need to be serious, be serious. But big believer of injecting humour into an event or to a live. Not making a comedy show, that's not the point. But
it's the Monsters Inc. theory.
Yeah. But,
it is. It's the Monsters Inc. theory. Laughter produces more energy than fear.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an amazing place. And the week before we did Magna in Rotherham, and that's an amazing place. And that's where they have another show. But the whole idea is just people don't like them, and that's up to them. But the whole idea is just to show, Facebook is massive as well. It's just to show off. It goes over 3 hours. People interact, people tell us what they see, what they hear. They like to see different locations. They like to hear the history of players. So it's just another way of doing things. It's not and 4 channels on TV anymore. There's loads of ways you can do it now, and that kind of thing. So we love it, and we just enjoy doing it. It's just a massive thing to get in locations all over the country, but to have something that's literally, on your doorstep.
That you haven't too long a commute to get home from.
Exactly, yeah. Before midnight, it's cracking,
Yeah, that's why I liked when I did Highlands House in Chelmsford. It only took me 12 minutes to get home. I was in bed by 2:20. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But are you going to go back to Pryzm and do another one?
We're talking to do more. Because obviously, one's good, but to do 2 to see if you get repeat activity.
Yeah.
It's good to compare it. That kind of thing. Maybe some kind of corporate thing, I don't know. So I think about 14 Pryzms nightclubs around the country.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see if they are new builds or they are in a similar kind of location to where Pryzm is. But yeah, talks are ongoing, and we'd love to do more.
Yeah. Because it'd be interesting to maybe set up some cameras overnight and all of that kind of thing to see if almost put those darned annoying cat ball things down, see if they get moved. And
yeah, it's been Halloween, so it's busy time at nightclubs. They do events, and we've said to Tom, you can check the footage. We've told him what time it happened, this loud bang on the dance floor. Please check the footage and see what it was, because it's being the cameras virtually everywhere. So I know hopefully when we get that, we'll obviously update people as to what it was. But it was such a loud bang that we all jumped, because not jumped out of fear, more jumped. It was a loud noise.
Yeah, it was a shock. Yeah,
exactly. But no, it's the history you've given us today is just. I just love the fact that it's a nightclub and it's full of happiness, and then rewind 200 years and it was this Pryzm basically. So
full of down and
it's.
outs.
And they went
actually,
from
I mentioned I found a death of one of the prisoners who died in the prison in 1874.
Yes.
He'd got a 10-month sentence for, I think it was stealing or something. He was well known to the magistrates at that point. And he apparently even the magistrate, when he sentenced this man, said, I don't think he's going to make it through the whole sentence. He's not going to live long enough. And he left a wife and a family and all this, which is very sad. I couldn't find out how old he was, but obviously he was ill. It's his name, though. His first name was James. His second name was Lee. His surname, he was never going to be anything other than a criminal. His surname was Swindles.
Yeah.
Honest to God, I found the newspaper article talking about him, and he did actually die in the prison. He was discovered dead in his cell. Not suspicious circumstances. So in other words, he didn't take his own life. But yeah, his surname was Swindles. He was never going to be anything but a con.
It's What year was it?
1874.
1874. Was that when it was a prison? When it was a prison, yeah.
It was the town jail. It didn't become the local prison for the whole area until 1878. Yeah, March 1874.
Because obviously in Nottingham we've got the Justice Museum, Gallows of Justice.
Yeah.
And obviously that was used to house criminals and women and men, and a lot of those people were shipped off to Australia.
Yeah.
From that place. So it's like, there's a hardcore prison, there's a softcore prison, House of Correction, and there's an intermediary one. So
it's almost like we have now Category A, Category B, Category D.
Exactly.
It was a similar sort of principle, albeit slightly different crimes. Yeah. All I know is when I come up to Nottingham, if I go to any of these, I want to bump into Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham, because that would be very, very cool.
It would. I mean, we love. Everybody should love the local where they're from, but we love our history. With Robin Hood, the legends and the myths. I know Yorkshire want to stick a claim in Robin Hood every now and then, but it's just great to have a legend like that on your doorstep, and it's great to get
one
into
of the big legends that he's known more for in York and your part of the world, who's actually an Essex boy, is Dick Turpin.
Well,
he was an Essex boy.
Yeah,
you lot up north claim him. Yeah,
because I think there is in the Shambles in York. There's a blue plaque saying that he lived here, or his parents lived there. And his grave's in the York Cemetery.
He was executed in York, but you guys up north, because obviously he worked his way up north, and I think he did ply his trade in Sherwood Forest once or twice. But you guys all claim him, and he's one of ours.
I've got something from down south, haven't we? Really, Yeah, but do Essex make a big play for him or not, though? Do Essex pick him up, or do Essex... Is there a museum?
A lot of people in Essex don't realise his connection. I mean, the fact that a lot of his crimes were done in Epping. I think he was officially born in London, but he spent most of his young life, adolescence and sort of juvenile side of things. But no, he spent a lot of time hiding out in Epping Forest and getting the carriages that went through what would have been the road at that point that went through the forest. There's a lot of highwaymen they liked the forest because they had fast getaways.
Exactly.
But I mean, Epping Forest has got a lot of myths and urban myths and legends attached to it, probably like any big forest has. But yeah, he was a southerner. Yet people always assume he was from Yorkshire or York because he was executed there.
Yeah.
And he wasn't.
Right, well.
He was one of ours.
No.
But then again, so is Matthew Hopkins, which isn't something I particularly am proud of. Anyone else would have him.
You know, we were talking about Matthew Hopkins before. In the magazine this issue, if I may, a feature on, not Hopkins himself, but there's a feature on a medium, Nicky Allen, who did a ghost hunt at Birdbrook, Flower at Birdbrook, and it was quite night, usual, but then at midnight, it went quiet, and then apparently this man, Darren the complete skeptic, was scratched several times and drew blood, the pictures in the magazine, and as it happened, it was the ghost of Matthew Hopkins coming through. Quite nasty, apparently, as well.
Right, I know we're digressing slightly, but you say that's in the next issue of Most Haunted.
No, it's in this one. This one is 21.
The one that's out at the moment.
The one that's out at the moment, yeah.
With the TWC guys on the front.
Yes, with the TWC boys on the front,
With our lovely
yes.
Tennessee boys. Okay, well,
yes.
we can digress slightly, because we do this normally when we do an interview, Paul. But Matthew Hopkins, they were talking about him on the Chelmsford Ghost Hunt a tour thing that I went on. And I just turned around and said he was a murdering con man. And people look at me like, bit extreme, isn't it? I said, well, what would you call him? He conned these people into believing all these men and women were witches. He would charge these towns and villages an inordinate amount of money to put them on trial and then execute them. He would demand things like his own rooms, fresh horses, meals 3 times a day, his own maid, his own manservant, all this stuff. In fact, some places he actually sent them bankrupt and they had to raise their taxes to get money back into the coffers. And then he was killing people. What else would you call him? He was a murdering con man.
Can I ask if you know if it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else, or did he go up town himself? Something, or I can get rid of your witches, that kind of thing, or did he? If it wasn't him, would it have been somebody else who would have done that? Well,
he did have a partner.
Right.
His name just escapes me right now, and it was the two of them that started it off. But John something, and I've just completely forgotten his surname because it's a weird surname, and I didn't realise we were going to be talking about this. But he did have a partner who, when they did the first trials in Essex, it was him and his partner who supposedly overheard this person claiming to be casting a spell or something along those lines. So he did have a partner, but whether someone else would have done it if he hadn't, I don't know if they'd have done it to that level and made it a business. He basically made it a business. You know, he went round. Most of his trade was plied in Kent, Essex, and Cambridgeshire. Those were the main areas he plied his, because obviously travel back in the 1600s wasn't as easy as it is now.
True.
But he would bankrupt places by, I think there was one of the places in Suffolk. He did actually bankrupt the village or town, whatever you'd want to call it, because he would charge per witch he tried. And so, depending on how many witches a place had, would depend on how much he charged for it. But he was also a very big fan of the book that James I had written, Demonology, as it was called, and yeah, I don't know whether somebody else would have done it if he hadn't, because when he came in, it had kind of not been as prevalent.
You know, was the town already in fear of witches? Do you know what I mean? Or did he go and proceed?
I think I personally think because everyone was still it was very religious still. You had that fear of good and evil. And, you know, it was easier to say that somebody had cast a spell on you if your crops failed than to just think, shit, it was bad luck. And, I mean, when you look at, Vanessa Mitchell's place, The Cage, the witch who was held there, that is very famous for being held there, well, recently they said she was a child murderer. Well, that's not strictly true. She was a herbalist who had apparently supplied some herbs to this woman to heal her young child. This woman hadn't paid, so she'd got a bit jarred off, like anyone would if you'd supplied goods that hadn't been paid for. And they had a row, or so the reports say, and then the woman's child died. And so she said that this witch had killed her child. Well, it could have just been the original illness had come back, and that's. But it's probably easier when they didn't have science to believe these things to be true. Yeah. But I also think that a lot of these men and women were just ones that people thought were loners, or were people who were a little bit different, or were people who maybe had mental illness, or people who just didn't like people.
Exactly.
And he capitalised on it. And
the methods to prove that the wasn't a witch was obviously.
You were damned if you do and damned if you didn't. I mean,
Exactly.
water treatment, having your hands and feet sort of tied or nailed together. If you floated, you were obviously a witch because the waters of God didn't want to take you.
Yes.
And if you drowned, God wanted you, therefore you weren't a witch.
Yeah.
What was one of the other ones they used to do? Oh, the flying treatment. That they would literally, I think they'd tie your hands and feet together, and then if your arms are tied behind your back, they would always put a rope around your wrists and drop you off a very high church steeple. If you plummeted to the ground and smashed, you were obviously not a witch. If you flew before you hit the ground, you were a witch. Things like that. You were kind of you were dying whether you liked it or not.
Exactly.
So no,
I mean, we spoke off air. Something I didn't know, to be honest. You mentioned that a lot of people think that witches were burnt at the stake in England, but I thought that was the case. Not all of them, but some of them. But that's wrong, apparently. Yeah,
most of them were hung if they survived the torture. I mean, burning was one of the methods of torture, because obviously, if they were a witch, the fires of hell wouldn't consume them. And some women were burnt. I mean, it was a bit more gruesome than just being burnt at the stake. But the conventional way of getting rid of a witch was very similar to what it was in places like Salem. Sort of 50 years later, they were hung. To be fair, though, a lot of them died during the torture. But if you look at, say, the famous one up in Lancashire, the Pendle witches, they were all hung.
Yeah,
they weren't burnt. Europe liked burning. Places like France and Germany liked to burn them, but England tended to hang them. In the main, there were the odd burning, but no, England tended to hang them. So, yeah, it's all pretty.
So we've gone from nightclubs to parrots to Witchfinder General, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it how diverse our chats are, Penny.
And that's not including the hour and a half we were talking off air before we started this. Well, where's your next live, my lovely? Where's the next live going to be?
Our next live is actually at the end of this month. It's at the Haunted Antique Research Centre in Hinckley. And we've got a very special guest, Mr. Barry Guy. So we're going to do a Haunted Live for 5 of us, but we're also bringing in Barry from GPS Paranormal, and obviously a few shows that he's been doing recently.
And is our lovely owner of Haunted Antiques going to be there as well?
Neil will be there, yeah. Yes, Neil. I mean, if anyone hasn't been, it's a cracking place. It's basically a museum where you can walk around, you can pick the items up, do your research on them if you want to. Neil says every item is haunted, doesn't say that at all. That's up to the people who go there to research and to investigate. But it's just full of death masks and memento mori pictures and World War II helmets and costumes and World War I wheelchair. Anybody who loves history itself would love it. Seriously, there's an occult part, there's a seance room part. Yeah, there's modern gadgets like Stickman and K2 meters you can use, but it's we walk in and I'm a lover of history like yourself, and just to see a Victorian doctor's medicine bag with all the stuff in it is just. I never thought I'd be able to get to open and see for myself. And it's just an amazing place. And whilst it's small, can't hold many people. That we talked about before. It's sometimes small is good. Sometimes,
yes,
6-10 people in a group, you may get more things happening unless it's 30 or 40 of you.
Yeah.
So so that's our next live.
Cool.
We've got a couple of events there too, and then it's Christmas soon. Can you believe it?
Don't. Don't remind me.
And next year we've got 4 events at Bosworth next year already locked in.
Cool.
So may have 5 or 6 depending on things that may happen. But 4 events, definitely March, June, September, and obviously Halloween.
Well, that's going to be our next talk, is on Bosworth.
Yes.
Definitely.
Well,
definitely on Bosworth.
We are learning so much. We went there for the first time last year for a recce. We knew the basic history, done some more research. So have the hotel, the hall owners. They've come back and said, look, there's graves, there's this kind of thing, there's the gardens where the lady was trapped and killed. So I think we are learning more about the house every time we go.
So the challenge is going to be on then to see if I can find something
out.
else.
Oh, definitely. And I think the house is learning more about us in terms of investigation side. But if you can, your history stuff, I mean, that would be perfect.
We will see. I do like a challenge, as you well know, Paul. Anyway, thank you ever so much for your time on tonight's Haunted Histories. It's much, much appreciated. Don't forget, if you're at Sage this weekend, go to the Haunted Magazine stand and go into Paul's face and go, "Ha! I heard you on Penny's show."
As long as you buy a magazine, as long as you can say what you want, I don't mind.
Well, anyone who can prove to me and go, "Ha! I heard you on Penny's show," you'll get a shout out on the following week as long as you tell me. So there you go. And if you can make Paul laugh, you get 2 shout outs.
Oh, I've got my jokes ready. My Sage Paragon jokes. So.
Oh God, are they as bad as your normal ones?
Yeah, they are. If not worse. So.
Well, I'm going to let you go now, Mr. Stevenson, so you can get on with working on whatever you're working on at the moment. Thank you again for being my lovely guest. I know we'll be speaking again.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for listening.
So thank you everyone for listening to tonight's Haunted Histories. It's been a pleasure as always chatting with you all. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you're in Nottingham and you fancy a boogie, go along to Pryzm and see if you can see anything that Paul was mentioning, and see if you hear the parrot. And if you hear the parrot, let me know, and I won't be going there. But on that note, have a great evening. If you're going to Sage this weekend, have a great time. You've got an amazing lineup there, and you might bump into a few people that you know. You never know. But all in all, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.